thesis holds true. We're going to hop into this one. Sloot, it's time for your private tutoring session with a man I'm kind of scared to leave you alone with.
Rich, it's good to have you here. When did you find out you were a wizard, by the way?
I'm not supposed to talk about it on stream.
Okay, I'm just a filthy muggle. We are getting ready for, of course, another Moth Souls runs. We all know these inside and out, but of course, for those tuning in, it is a dungeon that's, Rich, really just about execution, not too much creativity that the teams come up with here. I mean, you're very limited, if I will, with the Limit Guild here, in the kind of pulls you can do. Usually, as we see here, a mass pull right into Imran. Some teams Bloodlust, as we see Limit do, and some actually opt to not, unlike Sinking Ship here.
So one thing that I definitely want to point out here is, first of all, Tettles. So that's going to be on the side of Sinking Ship, the healer. Originally a Boomkin that's kind of transitioned into healer. Jack made sure to point that out to us. And that's an interesting transition to actually see, and it's something that we've seen from Boomkins quite a bit in the current meta.
We're actually seeing, even though Limit opted to use that Bloodlust, they're actually slightly behind on Imran in terms of damage. Both teams have been able to kind of, stabilize, get rid of the rest of the trash. No splash deaths onto the melee. We do have the Windwalker on either side. Rogues being, of course, a bit more defensive. They do have that cheat death, so they have that get out of jail free card. Teams moving in here towards the boss, making sure that they spawn these skeleton adds close to the boss, as they are not grippable. You want to make sure that the tank gets aggro on them right away. Well done by both teams as they start to cleave those down.
Yeah, definitely. We're going to start to see Imran melting here. Eventually, we expect to see someone from each side start to move closer and closer to that horn to save some seconds. You see Tettles going to be that player right now to do it for Sinking Ship. Want to make sure you can get every second possible. But we haven't gotten to talk about composition so much yet today. Only one series in the books. I will say that Limit's composition here looks to be one of the most textbook, right? They are going to have that Death Knight being the tank. They're going to have the Holy Paladin as the healer. And we know Trill can play Monk. Trill's a phenomenal multi-classer, but he is opting into that Rogue. And we're starting to see Monk, Rogue, and then either a Mage or a Warlock, depending on what the team's playstyle really is going to be. But so this is that time of Moth Souls where we're going to enter the bowels of the ship.
Yeah, quite scary as Sinking Ship enters the bowels of the ship. Certainly don't want to see that ship sink right now in their case.
Oh my goodness.
But a lot of damage coming in. Tettles going down. We do have both of the melee going down as well. Rich, this is the pull that we always talk about in this fortified setting. It's such a confined space. You have barrels of fun going out, hitting everyone in the face for huge splash damage if you fail to avoid it. You have the Swift Blades blinking around and just area denial right there. You have the Defiant Strike. You have the Quaking on top of it. And we see a lot of death suffer. And whatever lead Sinking Ship had in this case, as we see their Blood DK proc Purgatory, is pretty much gone. It goes down right now. Luckily, their checkpoint is here, releases right away.
It's tight down here, and it can definitely get messy, but we are seeing Limit get chunked as well, but they're able to hold on. You can even see Trill. His cheat death's going to be procced. The Rogue on the other side, his cheat death was procced too before he did go down. You mentioned that Purgatory got procced, but all of a sudden, Limit starts to really pull ahead here. They're going to be even on trash percentage now at this point, moving about the ship, trying to skip all of those unnecessary difficult pulls that Sap going to go out, going to help them get through this door as they actually do stealth around. But now they're going to have that advantage. They don't have those 4 deaths. That's 20 seconds against Sinking Ship as they move on over to Harboron.
And it's nice to see both teams actually doing the same strat. More popular here would be that somebody kind of pulls the Grime Lord and the Mariner to the side and the other team safely runs up, but both teams using that Rogue to their advantage as they run up and grab Harboron right away. Limit, of course, actually both teams, of course, bringing the champions with them. Now, you have to be really careful here because these champions do cast a fear on top of the boss, which spawns the servitor, and that needs to be interrupted as well. So a lot of interrupts that need to be constantly babysat on this fight, otherwise you're going to end up with a wipe.
There are a lot of things that can result in wipes on this fight, and you and I have had the pleasure of casting over quite a few wipes on this fight. One of the main things is actually how are you going to position during this fight, especially when you do have Quaking to think about, and you can see that Scythe coming down. If you stand in that Scythe, you are going to be absolutely deletified, and the other thing to note is you want to be able to stack up as much as possible so those adds have that very predictable spawn. You know where they're going to be, and you're going to be able to get out that effective cleave damage.
Right, you are, Rich. A lot of troublematic damage coming out of the groups right now, making sure that everybody kind of moves together around the area because the adds, the servitor spawns on players. We do have, of course, those fragments spawning on players as well, so it's really important to bait everything close because you have, see on the screen right now that you have the nether rips that spawn around the boss. So if one of the players is caught sleeping on the outside and spawns the servitor, as we see Tettles there kind of running along the outside, then you're going to have to potentially run through all of that goop on the ground and take a ton of damage just to make sure that that servitor gets interrupted, Rich.
Do not run through the poop on the poop deck. I don't care what the name of the poop deck is. You don't want to do it, not at all. But we are going to see Harboron, once again, melting a little bit faster on the side of Sinking Ship. They have just done a phenomenal job of getting very good damage out on bosses. You can see that Limit has already, they have invested their heroism here. They do it at a different time than Sinking Ship does. Sinking Ship used it on that first boss, I believe, and then now they're kind of at the point where they're going to be able to use this, I'm assuming, on this big trash pool here.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of two, right? You either do that Bloodlust at the beginning of the map and try to get a bit of it on Heli at the end, or Sinking Ship here, as we see you save it for this massive pull with the trash after Harbron. Now, they opt for the safer, more old Skjall strat, as we joked about last time, where you don't pull Skjall, the kind of mini boss, with the rest of this trash right here. There's a lot of interrupts that need to go out. There's lots of champions. There's lots of healing going out, of course, from those mist callers. So teams need to get this down as quickly as possible before the tank needs to turn too defensively and start, you know, backpedaling and making sure that they don't die. But they seem to stabilize here well. 9 seconds left on Bloodlust. I'll be moving over to Skjall in just a second. So whatever death differential they have with those 20 seconds, they seem to at least be maintaining a good enough lead to have that not be a problem later, Rich.
It looks like we're going to see Limit as well, kicking it old Skjall, not pulling Skjall. And that's important. You need to know your limit in a situation like this. But Sinking Ship should be able to get over to that mini-boss right now. And like you said, these 4 deaths, they may be able to just go fast enough based off their boss damage. If they can do what they have done on the other 2 bosses on Helia as well, Sinking Ship's looking like they're in a good place to start getting this upset going.
So Sinking Ship already starting on Skjall right now as all those skeletons spawn on the side. Spawns 2 about every 10 seconds or so. They need to be killed quickly or interrupted eventually. They will explode for some damage. Skjall also himself needs to be interrupted with his cast that occur every about 12 seconds. So it needs usually a 2-man rotation. Sometimes it's long enough for the 15, 2-man of course being the melee and the tank, to interrupt him. Otherwise he will apply a stack on the entire group that increases the damage taken by 10%, stacking. But no problem for them there. Already hitting that 40% mark on Skjall. Sinking Ship will soon get ready to start the RP on Helia.
These are really good times coming out from both these teams as well. That's the other thing I do want to note. I think the best times that we've really seen so far are very, very low 10-minute runs for the most part coming out of the European region. So we are seeing very, very promising runs coming out of both of these NA teams right now on our first day here during this NA weekend. But I really is just going to come down to this Helia damage. If Sinking Ship can come out like they did on the other 2 bosses, they're going to look scary even with this 20-second deficit from the 4 deaths they've accrued.
Skjall going down for Limit now as well. That fog of war, if you will, lifts for both teams. The skeletons, of course, don't despawn, but there's a bit of RP on Helia as Jethbel heads downstairs, starts that RP. The rest of the players clean up those skeletons, want to make sure they don't stay up there and cause any problems during the fight, just in case they don't evade out, as often players do kind of try to jump down and get rid of the skeletons in that sense. Now, name of the game here, Rich, as we both know, is you have to kill 6 tentacles in this first phase in order to start her second phase. Does not matter what combination of grasping and destructor that you do, but the destructor is the one that needs to be tanked, does a ton of damage to the tank, or whoever's, of course, in melee range if the tank isn't there, and the players also have to avoid either side of the ship depending on where she casts.
And the thing is this first phase, it's relatively well rehearsed by just about everyone. You talked earlier about how much we're all running this at the beginning of the expansion when we're kind of doing that great artifact power grind, but at the end of the day, if you don't respect these mechanics, you can still go down. And we saw that a little bit earlier. You can get whacked by one of these tentacles and it can just pretty much ruin your day, and it made it a very close call in that first series, but ultimately 6 is going to be the name of the game. Once you get them down, you're going to get that intermission. The front of the ship going to be broken down, and Helia is going to really start wreaking havoc on your squad.
Limit, of course, getting their Destructor to spawn in the back there, and not the best luck for them, really limiting their DPS because they just don't have the ability with that extra cleave, and of course spreading that Ignite if that tentacle is too far back for one of the diagonal graspings that spawn. Working on the remaining tentacles while Sinking Ship has already started on the right side of the screen, their second phase RP. Helia will shatter the front of that ship, starting her health at, I believe, 83%, and she does need to get down to 70.5% to finish the encounter, not 0%. But Rich, in this phase we have, you know, there's a minute of uptime where you DPS Helia, dodging that 1/3 of the platform where she ends up breathing, but then she goes down for 20 seconds. She's just not accessible. And as we were talking kind of behind the scenes before we started the day, none of the teams have been able to one-phase this boss yet.
Yeah, we haven't seen it yet. Anyone who does one-phase this will most likely have the best time that we've seen, period, for Maw of Souls throughout our entire 3-week period. This is now the 4th week that we've seen of Mythic Dungeons. Nobody's been able to do it yet. One thing Limit does have is at the minute mark, they will have their heroism to work with, but we've seen this quite quite a few times, and it's usually not very effective damage. You're not able to get that much uptime with that buff.
The problem is that minute of heroism, or bloodlust, or heroism as you call it, that minute of bloodlust will actually come up during their transition phase because it's a minute into the phase already, so they're really not going to benefit much from it. These teams are so fast right now that they're actually, the whole strat of trying to get a bloodlust and a half is just not working out so well for them, so you really just have to choose Harbor on, post-Harbor on trash or Immer on trash. Which one do you want to use the bloodlust on? Both teams used it differently, and we're seeing both teams in a very similar scenario here. Helia now reaching about to be 74% for sinking ship, as she will submerge and kind of do that 20-second timeout where players will just have to survive on the side.
We are neck and neck, but I will say, we were talking about sinking ship, how effective their damage really has been throughout the entirety. All of a sudden, we see Limit having their best performance so far on a boss. They have Helia a little bit lower than this intermission phase. Intermission already going down for sinking ship, and once again, they still have these 4 deaths to think about. Now it's going to be on Limit. This is definitely theirs to lose. They're just going to pop their heroism right now, have fun healing us up is what they're going to say. They run around, they're going to be sure to dodge all of that damage that's going to be happening, but even though their Helia isn't up yet, there it is. They should be able to take this one, Ted. Yeah,
I mean, it's just crazy the amount of damage that Limit ended up putting out when they were really quite behind on the first bosses in terms of single target, but we're looking on the damage meters here. I mean, the Warlock Bum Bum lacking compared to the ranged over on Limit. I know Jack's watching in the back right now. You have about 300-400 extra K DPS coming out of the healer versus sinking ship, so ultimately it just, you know, they almost caught up, but yeah.
And that's going to be so crucial too. I actually agree with that healer DPS being important, because when we're looking right now and saying, okay, what is the best Maw of Souls time that we really do see, it's coming down to 10-20 seconds that we have to think about.
I'm going to be able to pull that out, but the deaths really coming in there. And Limit, as you said, Rich, we're really putting on a performance at the very last moment there against Helia and really tightening up that gap, but some sloppy play coming out from sinking ship that, you know, kind of torpedoed them towards the end of that.
That is a tough pull. Even with being very well rehearsed, you have to go fast there. And you got about this much space and a bunch of abilities that are going to fill up that space. So all of a sudden, those barrels of fun, as we like to call them, they're going to, I don't care if it's Cinco de Mayo, they're going to ruin the party for you. We see that happen, and ultimately, it just spiraled out of control. I believe it was the rogues cheat death procs first, then the healer goes down, then 2 DPS go down. They're right there, so they're able to run back in, but all of a sudden, in the blink of an eye, you got 4 deaths. That's 20 seconds against you the entire time. It didn't slow them down, though. That's the main thing that we got to say about sinking ship. We talk about that first match being a little bit more one-sided than we saw last weekend. We already are going to start to see that that's not the case in some of these other matches that are closer seeded.
Right, and I do want to point out, if you saw that graphic, obviously sinking ships did not win that matchup. That was a first win for Limit, so apologies from us. A little bit of a mistake on our side, but yeah, I feel like we kind of saw this. It's appropriate that we're doing the Americas weekend right now. This performance actually from sinking ship reminded me so much of Friends with Affixes, right, from last year, where we would see them, they were performing very well when they were alive. It's unfortunate just these careless deaths at times ended up kind of being the deciding factor.
It is usually hard to perform well if you're dead on the floor, as I've discovered in this video game.
That's not true. Most of my LFR experiences, usually when I'm on the floor, the team does very well.
All right, I'm the king of LFR here, and let me tell you, I perform gosh darn good on the floor.
Right, you are, Harry. So what I was saying is, you're right, and it just comes back. We cycle the same thing over and over again that we said last week with Maw of Souls, and it's such an execution-based dungeon. It just comes down to just 2 deaths, 3 deaths, 4 deaths. That's all it took. I mean, they were ahead the rest of the map. If they didn't have those deaths, that game would have been theirs, and now they're in that precarious position with, you know, who's loser map pick going to best of 3.
Sure, and I do want to just clear up, the times ended up being for Limit, it was 10:41, and then for sinking ship, it was a flat 11. So, again, the deaths, as we look at those times, 19-second difference. I just want to point out, if you don't have the deaths there, that's a completely different story.
19 seconds is less than 20.
That is mathematically accurate. Let's check with the professor. What do you think? You have to be good at math this week, Rich.
Sounds right. It's crazy, though. I need to go back and actually double-check what that best time was, because I was talking to Sowers about it, like basically trying to be like, do we think anyone from NA is going to be able to grab that record? It's close. It is close, but mistakes like that, you're not going to be able to do it. And you look, sinking ship, you talk about, okay, take those 4 deaths out of it. They won on the first 2 bosses. They won that DPS race. Their trash pulls were very convincing. I think that was where Limit just like kind of pulled ahead a little. Like that is kind of where they caught up. They got a lot of their time on those trash pulls, but they won Helia, right? They definitely were able to get Helia down just a little bit faster. But ultimately, you don't have those deaths. Still, these guys just a little bit behind what we've seen out of Europe.
All right, well, that's going to do it for the first map of this series. So Limit taking early advantage. Will Sinking Ship be able to equalize, or will they fall to the watery depths, as their name would imply? Don't go anywhere. We'll find out right after this break. Welcome back. Limit with the early advantage, but we're going to switch it up a little bit. Well, I guess we're keeping it really in theme. We started from the ship. Now we're going to head to the beach. It is going to be Eye of Ajara with Sanguini.
Linguini.
Panini.
You feel good about that?
I feel horrible.
This is the last time we listen to Rich.
This is the last time we do something.
I'm so sorry. You deserve better.
You guys are idiots.
Yeah, no.
Professor Rich.
It's the glasses, right? You listen to it because
I was like, hey guys, let's do this really funny bit.
I'm competitive finding myself. Anyway.
Welcome back from the break, right?
We should get a retake
so
on that.
I have some stats going into this one. So this is something I've been working on for a little while. It's called the Trill Dad Theory. Trill performs 1,000 times better when playing with dads. So it all starts in the PvP scene. Now he's playing with both Mez and Sidu, both dads on the PvP side. Method looking very strong there. He plays on the Method PvP team. Now he's got a dad on this team as well. Expecting Trill to do really well.
Salute, anything you want to say that's on topic?
That really doesn't make any sense. But yeah, I'm excited to see them going in Ivashar. I think the only EOA picks we've seen, or at least amongst the few that we've seen, were actually out of Method EU last weekend. So we know they performed that really well, and it's a very open-ended dungeon. A lot of different pulls you could do, a lot of different boss order. Obviously, we see Parjesh first, but theoretically, you could do any of those first bosses first in whatever order you want.
No, it's very much kind of a choose-your-own-adventure there
it really
as you go down. So, and we have seen teams taking very different approaches to it. We have seen teams failing the mini-game where you have to jump up onto the traveling mount. Unfortunately, that has not been a high point thus far for us in the MDI community. We'll see if that changes, though. We are ready to hop into the game, so Beach episode is a go. I know I'm super excited. I always love when World of Warcraft has that anime Beach episode. So, gentlemen, take it away.
Anime Beach episode?
Yeah, you culture if you didn't get that one, Salute. You need some culture in your life. I'm excited for this one. So one thing that I definitely do want to point out, I did ask Sours during that break. Limit actually pulled down the 3rd fastest time on that last dungeon for Maw of Souls. Very impressive from them, but this is going to be Sinking Ship's rebuttal. This is their pick. They're keeping it nautical themed here on Ivashar. And as you mentioned, we really only saw out of Method EU. So I feel like the meta, as much as it's been solidified for a lot of these dungeons, this is one where we still have some questions. What are these teams going to do, especially with the multiple routes that you can take here? And this first pool going to look relatively similar on both sides.
Yeah, definitely similar for coming out. You know, the thing we have to really focus on in this dungeon outside of the Fortified is not so much the Sanguini Zucchini, but rather the bolstering. Bolstering is an incredibly limiting affix. It's just such a pain in the butt for players because every mob that dies, every trash mob that dies will buff all surrounding enemies, including bosses, by 20% of current health and damage as well. So a lot of the strats that you often see, such as in Maw of Souls, where you kind of pull all the trash with the boss, you really can't do that here unless you want to end up with a raid boss on your hands.
So one thing that I do want to say that's actually nice for Limit, it's the fact that they have preheat. Well, preheat's going to die. There we go. Caster Curse, if I've ever seen one. Maximus getting very low there. I don't even believe Purgatory is procced, but back down, yo-yoing back and forth.
The LOH as well.
Yeah, so that is going to be a little bit rough there. The thing that, Trill also going to have the cheat death proc. This is a really rough pull for them, and all of a sudden, we are seeing why Sinking Ship did pick this map. Very well rehearsed on that first pull. They're going to pop their heroism nice and early here, right on the Warlord. Main things to note about the Warlord, and then I'll get back to kind of what I was saying about having that mage, is, look, these ads are going to come out. He's going to throw out that giant spear. You saw the arrow on your screen. You want to make sure that the ads eat that. No one on your team does. Otherwise, it is going to be very, very bad situation. But the one nice thing about actually having a Fire Mage Salute that I was going to say with bolstering is you can get, they die, and you can also get out very even damage. So a lot of the times, you see Dr. J do it a lot. They're able to just get out this even damage. They're still able to do their full AoE potential and kind of work around bolstering. But ultimately, if you die, you can't do that so well.
Right, you are. Sinking Ship actually just about to finish Parjesh here right now. They're a well bit ahead of Limit. Of course, having more trash percentage under the belt, they do have to do this trash pack separately because we just discussed the kind of unfortunate, consequences of bolstering on bosses. They'll have to deal with that 4-pack first, while Sinking Ship is already done with the boss, rearing up to do a pretty big pull. Now, we've seen this pull here in the UA dungeons this tournament. Some of the teams really had a lot of struggle with it. There's going to be, I believe, about 6 to 10 mobs being pulled here, all AoE grip to the middle and just cleave down. Limit, of course, did struggle with an over-bolstered mob when the Naga took a while to cleave down. They haven't even started on that first boss. Sinking Ship already dealing with the second pull, after which I do expect that they'll kind of rear around to the right where the camera angle is right now and head over to Lady Haycoil, Rich.
Yeah, I mean, they've been steering their ship very well here. I will say that this is almost similar to what we saw in the first map, but a lot more devastating for the side of Limit. It was that one trash pull that allowed a team to pull ahead. The question is Limit going to be able to keep it to that one mistake, and will they be able to correct it? Once again, it seems like, obviously they are in that smaller portion of the screen, but it seems like they're going to have a really, really bolstered, they could, okay, they're actually on the boss right now, yeah, but the thing is that just having those really tough bolstering situations has already been the problem for this team.
I mean, you saw their Sinking Ship too. They had 3 warriors kind of slowly going towards them as the tank idled already started to kind of kite away because they just do so much damage. And it's funny, here we sit, a lot of people saying that there's not going to be warrior representation. We just saw 3 of them on the screen right now in the MDI, so great to see some class representation going on in this tournament. Sinking Ship does down that trash pack well and now moves over to these Arcanists. Now, you do have to kill 2 of them in order to have access to the next boss, Lady Lady Hate Coil, after which some teams actually opt to go kill Serpentrix first and then backtrack towards Lady Hate Coil in order to not have to deal with the dreaded seagulls on that boss.
We've seen quite a few different things come out, and I'm actually curious here which route they do take. Do they try to get rid of the seagulls? The other thing is you work around heroism in a different way, so you can kind of change your timings for that massive buff. Some like to call it Bloodlust, some like to call it the right name.
Which is ironic because they actually don't have anyone who can Bloodlust or Heroism on this team, as far as I can see, so they're likely using Drums of the Mountain or Drums of Fury.
So neither of the abilities.
Neither of the abilities. Let's go with that.
But they can grab Drums. There's a vendor in town. Not too much of a problem for them as they get this other pool going, but Sinking Ship, let's be honest, they haven't really made too much of a mistake yet. You can even see just very, very handily not creating a Sanguini Panini. They're not going to have any of the mobs getting caught in between there and getting healed up at all. Sinking Ship already potentially getting this last pull in before they go to the second boss or head over to Serpentrix. We'll have to see. And I honestly, this is one of the teams where, as we see their strategy, I'm going to take it very seriously as a rehearsed strategy and kind of glean a little bit of information from that, the same that we did from that Method EU strat, because they kept picking it over and over again. It was a statement map for them. Will it be a statement map here for Sinking Ship?
It's a lot of little gooeys coming in for Sinking Ship, and this is a lot of the trash between this and Lady Hate Coil, and we're going to see towards Serpentrix as well, where the trash, especially with Sanguine, is really going to be, Sanguini Christini, is really going to be quite a problematic, pull for them. There's a lot of casters. The Hydra kind of parks a lot of the time that we'll see later and cast inside of Sanguine. Sanguine, of course, jokes aside for those at home, it does heal mobs that sit within those pools. They do stack, and of course also damages players. So any mob that's kind of caught in there casting or hard casting, something you can't do, interrupt with just the normal kick, will just end up sitting there healing. But because they have bolstering kind of working in favor of that Sanguine, if all mobs are dying at around the same time, they shouldn't have too many troubles with it, Rich.
Oh wow, another cheat death going to be procced here. Yeah, that's honestly one of the scariest things that's probably happened to Sinking Ship, and they're going to have that get out of jail free card in cheat death. But the other thing I will mention with Sanguine on this particular map, for the most part, in most of the areas, it's not super dangerous because of how much space you have. I mean, look at how much they can just run. You can drop those puddles of badness wherever you want, and you're not really going to have to run into them again. Where it can start to get a little bit sketchy is when you actually move over to Serpentrix. But they decide to do Hate Coil first here, which is a strategy that we've been seeing more and more. And instantly, right out of the gates, we're going to see that massive rogue damage coming out. And once these ads come out again, he's going to be able to get even bigger damage, going to be able to use all those ads to create combo points and get finishers right into Lady Hate Coil.
Team doing well to stand on the islands there for a static shock, which of course if you're caught in the water during that, it is probably pretty lethal, and if it doesn't kill you, you will get stunned for a substantial amount of time, needing that dispel. Rich, as you alluded to, the little globules do come out. They opt to keep them alive. You can actually one-shot them with the frontal curse that goes out on players, but it will also blow away any of the islands on the ground. Tettle's doing well there to eat one of those tornadoes that also blows the islands away and immediately Skull Bash over to Lady Hate Coil, I'll charge over to Lady Hate Coil, getting ready to hide on the island again for the next Nova, while the Rogue is just getting so many free combo points from those globules that are staying alive.
Look, everybody on their squad gets something out of those globules, to be honest. Every single one of their DPS. The Warlock's going to be able to put Agonies all over the place, which is going to create more shards, which mean more unstable afflictions right onto Lady Hate Coil, which is going to be majority of the Warlock's damage. If the Monk really wants to, the Monk can cleave and actually get stacks built up and can spin to win a little bit. Not necessarily the path that I think the Monk chose to do there, which seems right. I'm definitely not a Monk expert, but I am the best Warlock in all of the land. And we're going to see Sinking Ship able to pull down this boss without too much of a problem. And once again, they just look perfect here so far. The scariest thing that happened is the cheat death being procced on that previous trash pool. Keep your eyes on the Rogue. Going to be somewhat of a susceptible target until that is off of cooldown.
Yeah, I mean, those snails are really dangerous. They move at top gun speed, and it's just impossible to see where they're coming from and just the direction they're hitting in. So, kudos to the Rogue for managing not to get one-shot by that, because the cheat death did save him there. Sinking Ship now pulling some of the crabs along with the Hydra. Hydra, a very dangerous mob in this instance. Does a lot of these frontal casts with area denial on the ground, but also does just an off GCD spike nature hit on the tank. Want to be careful with that, and they're doing well to kill that first and start moving the rest of the crabs away, because as we said earlier, Rich, you don't want to spawn that Sanguini Panini under the boss, under the Hydra.
Yeah, so Sanguini Panini is also something to think about, but when we're talking about affixes, this is one of the particular ones dungeons where you have to pull awkwardly. You can't get these massive pulls going for a lot of reasons. And when you look at these crabs and then you compare them to some of the bigger adds, they just have very different health pools, which is going to affect how you can really AoE during bolstering. So a pull like this, the question is, how do you want to do it? Most likely they're going to be focusing a lot of their damage right now onto that hard shell, onto the big crab, and then just kind of deal with the consequences. And you can see that focus damage goes out. These little crabs going to be bolstered, but only slightly. It's only one stack. If you do it the other way around, all of a sudden you are in for a world of hurt.
And by killing, of course, Lady Haycoil first, we do see that those seagulls have now become land gulls and landed down near the boss. Something that the reason, these are so much made fun of and kind of feared really is that once you pull them, they're not particularly devastating in terms of damage output, but they will occasionally disorient their current target, oftentimes being the tank. And as soon as the tank gets disoriented, it drops all aggro for the duration of that disorient. So likely an unfortunate, I don't know, let's say Windwalker will get smacked in the face and die as a result. So teams, if they pull it, especially with a bigger pull like this, will often try to have, let's say, the healer taunt off, make sure that that Seagull is actually disorienting any non-tank while the tank safely tanks everything else.
Yeah, it's a very important thing to pay attention to, and hopefully a future affix in the game. I would just love Seagulls in every dungeon.
Nice.
Now we are going to see them move through this pool, and once again, you got another big mob that you got to get focused down, and you're going to see that three-headed beast fall to the ground before these other smaller crabs, and now just cleaning up that seafood buffet.
Looks delicious. I actually really want some sushi right now. Limit, I believe they had 2 deaths last time we looked over, and I think they've accrued an extra one. Fortunately, we did just peek over, so might have missed that, but nonetheless, they do have 3 deaths on the board, 15-second difference between the teams in terms of that sinking ship. Finishing up some of the remaining trash, want to get as much out as possible so that they could do the ship skip, which they don't have really an ideal comp for, but I think they should be able to pull it off, of course, with that Resto Druid, but they don't have an extra Demon Hunter to help with that, so it's really going to be one person at least to start with ferrying them over, which is why you're seeing so much extra trash in this zone being pulled by sinking ship right now. They'll likely focus most of their damage here on the Hydra one more time, making sure that a lot of those sanguine pools don't spawn under.
And the other thing you need to be looking at too here when you're really focusing on the race at hand, obviously that death differential is going to come into play, 15 seconds, but also sinking ship already pretty much done with trash for the dungeon because you get down after you actually you do that ship skip, you go up, you kill that 4th boss, and then when you come down, you only have to kill those casters around, and that's going to be a whopping percentage.
It gives, of course, 8%, yeah, about 2% per caster, so as long as you're seeing around that 92% mark for sinking ship, which might be just shy because some teams do have to kind of keep that snail on the side in King Deepbeard's room, making sure to get that extra damage. You see that Warlock kind of multi-dotting that. They do start to head over now to Serpentrix, a 3-phase boss. Phase 1 occurs at every, 100% of course, then 66 and 33%. He will submerge, spawning 2 extra heads, 1 arcane head and 1 fire head. The fire head will just pulse for static damage on the group, while the arcane head will get an increasing damage, a single target cast on one of the players. Really important to silence and interrupt that, else one player will eventually get one shot. Rich, it is pretty common for teams as well at that 33% mark to actually just kind of CC, silence the heads, and just go and kill the boss, because they will despawn once Serpentrix dies.
Yeah, that's an important thing to note, too, and it also does allow you to get a huge burst of damage on your primary target. We talked about how a lot of these classes that we saw on the side of Sinking Ship were able to fully utilize the globules to create extra damage on Haycoil. You can get a similar thing going with the Warlock with these extra heads, and instantly you can see those dots going up. Wants to make sure to kill them now. You can't leave them up for too long when Serpentrix is at this 50% mark. They get that arcane down first. You don't want that damage to stack up. Then you're going to be able to get that red head down without too much of a problem. Another set should come up here, and then probably just going to see them get dotted up and all of that damage be focused on Serpentrix.
Good camera here of Bum Bum right now as he pours all his UAs into the boss. Limit's substantially behind at this point. They're 21% behind on trash. That was some quick maths right there. They do have the 3 deaths on the board. Serpentrix hasn't even entered the first transition phase, as we're already seeing Sinking Ship work on the second phase right here. They're playing it safe. They're opting to kill the remaining heads before getting back on Serpentrix. Don't want to risk any extra death, having to accidentally mess up any of that CC, nothing like that. So downing the 2 heads even in this fortified setting, after which they will reconvene on Serpentrix, finishing the boss, and then they're going to head over for that boat skip.
Lots ahead there, Sue. But one of the main things that I do want to note is this seems to be like such a good pocket pick. We saw it come out of Method. Not a lot of teams are coming super prepared. Limit they looked lights out. We said third best time for Maw of Souls. Now they get here into this dungeon, and they've had these little mistakes that come from not having that perfect rehearsal, and we're seeing Sinking Ship look just absolutely lights out. They even get this little trash pull with the crabs at the end there while they're working on the boss. We said they want to hit that 92% mark. The 2% going to be that tricky little thing here, and most likely they're not going to be able to get it too efficiently unless they do go for something like that snail.
I think it will be that snail, but I mean, you're absolutely right. We do see the Mage's Bloodlust come out here for Limit right now as they opt to go for the strategy of killing Serpentrix and leaving the remaining 2 set of heads intact, just trying to get as much damage out as they can.
So well done.
That was well done. Sinking Ship just moving up so quickly for this boat skip right now. We often see players kind of struggle with, you know, just honestly spam clicking the side of that cliff as soon as you jump up. Everybody is up first priority. Excellent Warlock portal being put down. Sinking Ship now runs over, getting ready to pull King Deepbeard, the 4th boss of the dungeon. We do see this Warlock kind of hanging back. I'm not sure if the snail was pulled. We'll have to see once the camera angle changes here, but everybody getting in on Deepbeard as quickly as possible. We do have to watch out here for a few main mechanics. We do have this bubble, as you see 2 of the players have right now, which hasn't absorbed in terms of damage taken on it. The higher the amount of damage taken is on there, the less the bubble will explode for on the group. We do see, of course, that little wee snail on the side of the screen indeed was pulled by the Warlock.
Wee snail just moving along, but the main thing is here is how many UAs have you already seen got cast? It's just free soul shards that are going to be coming straight into this Warlock's pocket, and he can just put them all in. Tettle's here getting very low. Tettle's actually going to drop. They do have battle reses to get him up, but while we see this healer down, some scary stuff's going to be going on the DPS. Need to invest some cooldowns here to keep themselves up, but ultimately with 44%, are they thinking about holding here? The Warlock could try to get up Tettle's.
This is, I mean, this is a sketchy call because there will be some residual damage coming from the Quake cast initially. Players will need to move out of that Quake afterwards to make sure that the 5 seconds when Aftershock is cast does not.
I see no reason not to get Tettle's up.
Yeah, I mean, this is risky. This is really risky right now, unless, you know, they're having some own issues on their end. But right now, I mean, they're just praying for that consumption every 45 seconds and whatever self-healing. We do know Warlocks are particularly durable. Rogue's not bad either. The Windwalker is the one we'll have to keep an eye on as the bubble does come out on that Windwalker. Wants to make sure to get as much of that damage shoot through the bubble. You see those debuffs popping in and off the player screen as he runs through these kind of water rings, making sure that he depletes a lot of the damage intake on that. The DK should have no problem staying live, and they'll hopefully be able to use that consumption to just keep everyone intact. And it looks like they are. I mean, the boss is already at 5%.
I honestly, I'm going to be completely honest. I think pulling up Tettle's here, that's what you didn't want to see.
Yeah.
You did not want to see that cheat death get procced. That's actually a bigger resource in my mind than that extra battle res is going to be going into this last boss, just where they're at. I'm going to assume something happened as far as connection is concerned with Tettle's, because there's pretty much no other reason for it to happen. But you know what? It wasn't caused by connection. We see a death go down on the side of Limit. This is going to be their 4th death right now, and this is going to be a doozy. They're falling so far behind, and I got to bring up with Sinking Ship, even with whatever happened with their healer, they still have maximum DPS on this boss. They may have one of the best times that we've seen in this dungeon so far, because even down to just that little ship skip, to how they pulled the snail to get extra damage out on the boss, to get that final 2%, they look flawless here.
I mean, yeah, so you see that beautiful 92% coming in for these last mobs, the ones that are needed in order to spawn Wrath of Ashar in the first place. Maximum does come back up for Limit the Blood DK. After they were able to finish the crabs off, no reason to use that battle res there. Well done by then. But, you know, a lot of trash to catch up on right now. They're still sitting at 76%. They don't have anybody who can really well skip the ship, which is why you're seeing them go in the side of the cave, as most players do see on live. Sinking Ship now moving to the second, finishing the second of these 4 kind of Enchantress mobs on the side, and then soon they're going to be ready to pull that last boss. I mean, they're just miles ahead right now, Rich.
Yeah, and I also do want to say, just got word from production and our admins that Tettle's did not DC. That was the decision that actually went down from the team, and I'm excited to hear from them what exactly went into the process of that decision.
Interesting, because
interesting play.
They did use the battle res towards the end of the fight. I think at that point they're like, okay, look, this is getting a bit out of hand. We don't want to have a wipe here at King Deepbeard at, you know,
pretty
4%.
Much right after the cheat death went off.
Yeah. Right at 4%. So you know what? Let's pop up and just heal everyone up. Sinking Ship moving to the last mob right now, getting ready to pull Wrath of Ashara, whilst Limit on the left side of the screen, rearing around outside of that cave and moving up to that double giant pull, the one that most people opt to skip. So I wouldn't be surprised to see kind of a mage pull to the side with an invis as the rest of the team runs around to the left side. Sinking Ship finishing off the mob here, Rich, and let's talk a bit about Wrath of Ashara now.
We'll talk about Wrath of Ashara and all the mechanics, but I gotta say, Sinking Ship is just absolutely mopping this watery floor with Limit at this point, but Eye of Ashara is going to be the last thing that stands between them and victory. And the Wrath of Ashara, the main thing to note, starts at 20%. So there are a lot of cheeky little things that you can do to permanently stay and execute. Warlock does have the option of going for that, playing Death's Embrace. Not sure if the Warlock will. We'll see it pretty quickly depending on where the damage does fall, and you can see a lot of damage coming out. So maybe actually spec into that. That would be like 35% increased damage coming out from the Warlock. But the other things that we need to know are going to be these mechanics that need to be dispelled.
Yeah, so no bear form from Tettles there. Trust the rest of the group, knows the damage intake on that 22 for that split damage, physical damage that we saw in the group. And just like that, I mean, in the blink of an eye, we're already hitting the 10% or halfway mark on this boss. Once that happened, he actually increases the intensity of the storms around the area, calls down the rains in Africa, and makes sure that the players really have a tough time getting a lot of that space that they need with the damage. You have that huge tank AoE frontal that the players need to avoid. You have the area denial that people need to group in on one of the rain, or actually one of the players, period. Want to make sure you get that damage in, but I mean, they're just dealing with all these mechanics perfectly. Only had that one death on the healer, and they're just going to be able to easily tie up the series, Rich.
I mean, they also make that Wrath of Ashara fight look like just about the quickest thing that you could imagine, and Limit only on King Deepbeard now. I believe they didn't even do the ship skip. They just went and they moved through that cave, did it basically just following the layout, and that's just not going to be quick enough because ultimately it is sinking ship with only that one death coming in here and near perfect run through this Eye of Ashara. Potentially the best time that we've seen. It looks like it's going to be
another
19 minutes. Yeah,
just to add kind of some salt in the wound there, but I mean, really, really dominant performance from Sinking Ship there, Rob.
Certainly smooth sailing for Sinking Ship. That was their map pick, and really, I think the only time we've seen Eye of Ashara be picked where it wasn't advantageous for the people that picked it were when Method last week was, they had connection issues with Gingy, and Games Revolted was able to take the win. But otherwise, yeah, I do want to talk a little bit more wax poetic on why Eye of Ashara is a good counter pick. It is one of those maps, because it's so open, that it's really difficult to navigate. Obviously, we look at Maw of Souls as being the premier execution map. Eye of Ashara, it's just right down to what pulls do you take, where do you actually take them. Real estate is such a concern, especially once you get around the seagulls. Like, how you actually approach that map is really one of those things where if you don't practice it, it really shows. And that was, I think, what we saw from Limit.
Yeah, and the thing to note, I'm not sure how much it was intended. I'll go ahead and assume it was. I mean, these are some of the best teams in the world, but just the counter pick and seeing the comp that Limit was already locked in with. They didn't have the advantage in their classes to do the boat skip. Pretty much at all, let alone efficiently. And they knew that that's a huge time sink for that team with this map pick. So really well done by them.
It's also, so that happens, right? And the fact that the boat skips there, that's a massive amount of time. It truly is. But the other thing that we didn't talk about nearly as much, I think we kind of did when we were casting Salute, really is just going to be those affixes for this dungeon. This is one of the dungeons when you look at the affixes and you go, yeah, certain comps are going to have a really tough time based on how they want to do damage. They're going to have to go for slower pulls, and that's just going to lose them so many seconds off the clock. So we really did see that come out of Sinking Ship. They just managed to get these big pulls, and every single pull was efficient and have fully utilized their classes, the mechanics of their classes, to get additional resources, additional stacks of abilities, additional combo points, whatever it may be, to just get more damage on their primary target.
Yeah, for sure. Things going to plan right now for Sinking Ship, but this is where things obviously take that tumultuous turn. They are now going to have to win on Limit's pick. Can they do so? Can they win the series, or will they be heading down to the loser's bracket? We're going to find out right after this short break. Don't go anywhere. More Mythic Dungeon Invitational when we return. all knotted up at 1-1, but it's going to be decided in Vault of the Wardens with the Grievous Affix. Now, we were talking at the beginning of the show, how much is North America going to be learning from the Europe week? And we did see Shell's Angels, obviously one of the teams moving on to the global land from Europe. They did use Vault of the Wardens as a counterpick to great effect. And I'm curious to know whether or not for Limit this was something they were always planning, or maybe this is something that's influenced by what they saw last week. Rich, where do you tend to land?
You know, one thing I want to say about Limit is I feel like they're one of the teams in the NA that have spoken the least, right? I think they're one of the teams that have bragged the smallest amount about what they really can achieve. So I think that they probably have had for the longest time some secret pocket picks that they don't want broadcasted. They don't want people to know how well they can actually do these, how quickly they can do these. But it is really exciting this week to have all of this knowledge that we have. I think this is kind of really when we get here for this fourth weekend, it's almost a completely different mindset. We really do know what teams need to do. We know what to expect. We know these different things in the meta, and that's got to be affecting the players.
And you know, so do they, is what I wanted to say. It's what we talked about at the beginning with Jack as well, that kiss curse. You know, you have, you're confident in your strats, you go in, and then you're like, oh, you know, that's an interesting core to star skip, and you know, that's an interesting this and that, and you see the different dungeons. And you know, for some teams, they might go, you know what, I'm confident in our strategy, it's probably better. Some teams go, okay, we really got to shape up, because we don't know not only if we change it, but we don't know if our competition's going to change it. And if they adapt to that potentially superior strat, we're going to have to follow suit as well.
Yeah, for sure. And as we said, Shell's Angels had so much success with Vault of the Wardens that really no other team was able to replicate. Maybe that's something you pick up. Rich, you are right, though. We do come into week 4 with so much knowledge. We have to wear glasses to contain it all. But we're going to go ahead and hop into this match. This is going to be the decider in this series for Limit versus Sinking Ship. Professor, Dad, take it away.
Boy.
Which am I?
So, Rich, in this dungeon, you know, a lot of the focus here really is we are in that fortified setting. So the first thing everybody thinks about in this dungeon is Glaviana, that mini boss at the start that's kind of hovering. We can see there in the top left or in the middle of the screen now for Sinking Ship. A lot of teams do a massive pull. We see that pre-bop come in on maximum as he heads around. Does the huge pull similar to we saw Shell's Angels do, and it's going to be all eyes there, but we already see the Monk go down.
Oh, that's not how you want to start that one off. Monk gonna instantly try to get back into the damage.
Monka S.
Yeah, Monka S for sure. Please get back here, Lit Monk. Certainly gonna roll back in, and now will they be able to stabilize Sinking Ship? Doing a very big pull as well, and like you said, this is really the first test for this group. Now, keep in mind, this is Limit map pick. We saw Sinking Ship. Okay, they're actually going to lose their
Bum falls down on his Bum. Unfortunately, we do have that death go down on the Warlock. Immediately releases comeback. Luckily, towards the rest of the end of the trash. But you know, we saw Glavion at 33%. We know when she hits that 50% range, she actually metamorphosizes, doing 50% increased damage and starts pulsing a huge amount of damage onto the group. So both teams having a bit of a struggle here on the pull. I do very much suspect that Lit Monk died because we did have that bop on the tank maximum as he ran around grabbing the mobs. So accidentally we had, you know, he did something to pull aggro. Tank was not a viable target because the bop was up. Of course, the hand of protection, the hop, I suppose I should say, and the Windwalker went down. And as you said, Rich, yeah, we see that perk proc again.
Well, I want to just note, obviously, we see both these groups being tied at 1 death apiece. We know Sinking Ship, they got kicked right in the bum. But Limit, the thing that we have to note is moving forward, they don't have cheat death or purgatory. So that's going to be a little bit scary moving forward for these later pulls. Obviously, they get past the really scary one, but they got to make sure here that they don't get in any of those situations where you can get fell gazed upon, because that could just be enough to take them down at this point, and that could be an absolute
It's not even just the gaze, but we have a lot of interrupts that need to go out here. One of them is an immediate one-shot on the group. It's a long cast, but we have seen groups fail to get the interrupt with that ability, so we'll have to make sure and see that the teams do that. Of course, Blood Elves still have access to their AoE silence for now. Sinking Ship doing a similarly large pull, but Limit really looking to light a fire under Sinking Ship's bum right now by having a massive pull. About 50% of the trash in the dungeon is actually already done before the first boss, so a very front-loaded dungeon in terms of the trash. They do well here to finish it up, and they'll be moving on to Terathon, the first boss.
Yeah, I think that it's important to note that it's front-loaded in trash. It's going to be the hardest trash at the beginning, but then once you move forward just a little bit, the decisions that you make with trash are going to be absolutely critical. We've seen really interesting skips come out in that dark room, but now let's turn our attention to the first boss. This boss is going to have multiple forms in this fight, Sloot.
Yeah, so there's 3 phases. We have just this kind of humanoid form at the start. We'll see momentarily that he will transform into his Vengeance form, where he will take 25% decreased damage and opt to throw his glaives around the side of the room, making a chain around that middle well area where of course, Timmy is trapped. They will have have to kind of kite around the middle. Now, not too much of a problem, of course, for the healer, the tank, and the 2 melee, and they do have an advantage in the mage, as the mage can actually blink over that chain as it starts to hover around ominously nearby. But, you know, there's a bit of damage loss, and of course, that Volcanic Affix is a bit of pain in the butt for the mage. Similar pull coming out of Sinking Ship right now, but I believe they pulled some trash with the boss, if I'm not mistaken. Yes.
Yeah, I think they did actually pull that trash that's right up on that staircase. Sometimes we'll see people stealth around it. Sometimes we will see them pull it with the boss, and this is one of those moments where you go, okay, we're going to start seeing interesting decisions go down with trash, and it's going to happen even when we get to that second boss, when we get to Inquisitor. Are you going to pull the dogs alongside it? You know, we saw teams that had Moonkins opting to do that pull, but ultimately, even if you don't pull additional adds, this boss is going to throw a few at you. You can see right now those Spell Furies coming out. You need to make sure that you cleave them down throughout this boss fight.
Yeah, if they reach that 10 stack, they will explode for a substantial amount of damage on the group. Doing well there to clean that up, no problem. Tirathon now already in that third form we were talking about, that Havoc form where he pulses damage on the group, similar to Glaviana earlier in the trash. Now sub 10%. Want to make sure that the tank is popping active mitigation during those dark strikes. Every clean hit with dark strikes that goes in on the tank without active mitigation up will, of course, add an absorb to the boss. So extra health you don't want to have to chew through. Sinking Ship not too far behind, though, Rich, at that 15% mark.
I think the most important thing here was not grabbing another death if you were limit, because you did have that cheat death, you did have that purgatory on cooldown. They're getting out of that danger zone right now. They were very much in the danger zone, and now they are somewhat close to the end of the tunnel. The light at the end of the tunnel is almost there as you watch those abilities slowly tick down. They got to get past the Imp Mother, or the Foul Mother, sorry. I believe your mother-in-law. And at the end of the day, this is not a super scary thing to get through. If they can have these abilities off of cooldown by the time they get to Inquisitor, they're looking like they're in a good place.
Right, you are, of course, modeled after Mama-in-Law Salute there. Foul Mother going down in a moment for Team Limit. Sinking Ship following suit, getting that pull with both sides of the imps. Both teams do that. The imps do give about 0.3, 0.4%, something like that, and there's a ton of them, so you have the tank go down one side, a durable DPS or a pre-bop DPS go down the other, bring all the imps together, get that AoE grip, and we see the avalanche potions coming out of the Team Lit Monk. Unfortunately, does not, and faces a death at the bottom of the stairs, either fails to pull that potion, or I'm not really sure what happened, but that is the 5 seconds on the clock.
Tuck and roll, Lit Monk. Yeah, tuck and roll.
Doesn't work out for them. Res him up, and they're getting ready to pull Inquisitor Tormentrum, which of course realizes that he has new subjects.
I got it, Reddit. I got it, Reddit. I'm just going to roll right at the bottom. But ultimately, they are going to go for that pull. They're going to pull the dogs along with it, and we've seen this quite a few times. It looks like they got 3 or 4 of them right now, so they're going to be able to get this extra trash percentage, and they need to be efficient here. That last death is pretty bad for them, those extra 5 seconds, and I'm a little curious. It was probably just a simple mistake, you know. It just comes out, you're not able to get that potion off, you take that fall damage and die.
We do know for these dogs, of course, there are 2 types of them. There's a Defiler and the Scorcher. Defiler, you just have to interrupt the drain, but the Scorcher really has a much worse bark than its bite. It will actually explode for a fair bit of damage on the group, and they actually don't kill it before Inquisitor Tormentrum heads over to the first jail corner. Of course, he selects randomly 2 of 4, which is the same for both teams, you know, for tournament integrity, of course, but Inquisitor Tormentrum does go over to that kind of Fel Lord side with the Warlock that you want to make sure you interrupt the seeds on. The Fel Lord will often drop aggro, charging one of the far players of the team, punting him up, and then since the aggro is dropped, if the tank doesn't grab it quick enough, they can actually smack the healer nearby or one of the range, so they do well there. 40% now. Rich, we head over to the second jail for Team Limit.
And also just want to point out that Max is going to be kind of out of that danger zone now. That Purgatory is going to be off cooldown, so they're starting to get those disadvantages wiped clean, but you can see Sinking Ship has started to catch up more and more and more, and we saw earlier on in that first map, Sinking Ship does a phenomenal job when they are comfortable at getting out this very effective boss damage. And this may be another opportunity for them to catch up. They did on the first 2 bosses. Obviously, they put the Clinic on in the second map. Will this be where they start to catch up to Limit?
We see the Blood DK, unfortunately, on Sinking Ship actually get disoriented from those Inquisitor eyes in the middle. You want to make sure you are, of course, facing those by the time that channel cast goes away. Now, I'm not really sure what they did there. They kind of started moving towards the strategy where they line of sight further along in that hallway and then realized that maybe I don't want to do that. So once Inquisitor Tormentor ported away, everybody ran over. They probably missed just a few seconds of DPS having to run so far, so not the best decision there by them, but nothing too costly for now. Limit about to finish off is Inquisitor Tormentor. Big hit coming there on preheat, but no fatality, and they will be moving over to the trash that will, of course, then open up the next 2 bosses in optional order.
That's an interesting strategy, too, to bring up for, you know, people who've been watching the MDI, people who've been running this dungeon. I know a lot of people still kind of opt into that strategy of, okay, let's line of sight. And the main reason that it's kind of not in vogue right now is because of the current tier 1 tank, which really has been the Death Knight. And you can use things like Orphene's Grasp. So you just end up losing effective DPS, and it's just better to do the mechanics and just look and actually pull everything in. So that's why we see it a little bit less now than we did in the first MDI, because we see a lot less bears.
I totally agree with you. Sinking Ship pulling a few of the dogs over. Limit already finishing this pull-up soon. They have to be careful at the pace at which they kill those Scorchers that I mentioned earlier. Those do explode for damage on the group and further buff Leon as well. Fair bit of damage that comes on the tank from Ileana. Want to make sure you stop your cast during her piercing shout. Now, it's going to be interesting to see where they go first. They actually go to our good friend, Lord Glazer, first. They have access to any of the 2 next bosses. Lord Glazer, of course, our resident eyeball. And Rich, of course, you being one of the professors here, you know that he's a star pupil.
Yeah, you know, he definitely was not in my math class, though, because this guy, being a star pupil, is good at stuff. Unlike me. Now Glazer is going to be getting DPS'd upon, and the main thing to note about this fight is you want to kind of stack up here. You want to get those orbs, hitting that boss, getting that little bit of extra damage, but at a certain point, he's actually going to go down, put out that I-beam, and you're going to have to wail on the mirror like it's May 6th, and you just woke up after Cinco de Mayo, and then he will realize just how terrible his night really was.
Glazer now going to his immunity phase. Happens about 40 seconds into the phase. He takes 99% reduced damage here. You can still maintain some kind of, you know, dot, etc., but you want to make sure that you face these 5 statues in a way as to redirect the beam back into Bum Bum. I'm not, of course, referring to the Warlock on Sinking Ship, rather Glazer's Bum Bum here. It will shatter his shield, giving 100% increased damage for about 12 seconds. Players will want to get as much burst here as possible. Sinking Ship over on the right side, really not far behind, but they are just now entering their immunity phase.
Truth hurts, don't it, Glazer, you ugly fool? And as you can see right now, Limit going to be able to take him down without too much of a problem. Maintaining their lead right now on their map pick. They do have that extra depth to work with, but they've definitely pulled ahead on this boss, and now they're going to be moving on over to Ash Golem. The question is, I'm trying to decide when are heroisms going to get used here? Most likely just going to get used on that last boss at this point.
Yeah, I don't think we're... Well, maybe in the case of Sinking Ship, because they're a bit behind, they might opt to bust it out on Ash Golem. I don't think Limit will, unless they try to use it towards the end of the boss.
Do you think that that could be a way for them to really catch up? One of the interesting things about that last boss is the way that it does have phases. Like we talked about with Helya, maybe you get less effective uptime from that massive buff. Maybe this is how Sinking Ship can start to get back into this, because Limit has pulled ahead somewhat convincingly at this point. It's by no means out of Sinking Ship's hands. One mistake can really put Limit behind, but just something to ponder about.
I mean, catch up or not, Sinking Ship really relishes the idea that they want to kind of catch up by doing as much DPS as possible. And Ash Golem, which, similar to Glazer, has this brittle phase that we're seeing here right now, where he takes 20% increased damage for those 20 seconds. So it lines up well with those, of course, multiplicative benefits of the damage CDs coming out. But I'm not sure if they'll really get too much effective uptime out of it. I mean, Ash Golem here already at 45% for Limit. They probably won't even have their Bloodlust come off CD by the time the boss is dead. Sinking Ship, I'd assume, maybe won't even get a full Bloodlust out of it, so we might see both teams just using it on Cordana.
It's looking like it's going to be Cordana, Bloodlust all around for both of our teams, which makes us think, how is Sinking Ship going to catch up? They're slightly behind on Trash as well at 91%. We know with 94%, there is a significant amount of skipping that Limit can do in this bottom room, but we know even if they were at 100%, they would need to get that pull right before the door going, otherwise that won't open. That's basically the gatekeeper, and you got to take down the gatekeeper. If you want to go through the gate, you got to pay the troll, the troll toll.
The troll toll, indeed. Ash Golem, of course, frozen here. Things about to heat up for Sinking Ship as he shatters out of that brittle phase. We do see in just a moment Limit will be entering their second brittle phase, where our Molten Giant resident will, in fact, freeze up, freezing that cold, cold heart of his, similar to your mother's, Rich. They will run over off the platform here and go over to the elevator in a second. I know, but, you know, you had that foul mother, and we're just going to have to even it out, Rich, much like the series is evened out at 1 apiece. They do use the Rogue Stealth here to save a lot of time because in this sense, they actually have to go all the way around back towards Glazer's room if they didn't invis pot or have access to the rogue here fast enough as well within this mass stealth, which I believe lasts 12, 15 seconds, to get past the jailer as well, which some teams are forced to skip by actually having their tank sacrifice and pull to the side.
Make sure that you hit the potion this time. It looks like everybody should be good. Everybody should survive here. And just want to take a quick moment as we watch them go back up on this elevator in an otherwise RNG-free expansion to say sorry, moms. We love both of you very much.
It is Mother's Day soon, so shout out to all of them.
And there we go. We actually are going to see a death come down onto the tank there. And this is one of the things that actually gets tricky. If you end up pressing that potion at the wrong time, and then you clip the elevator the wrong way, you end up falling to an early death. Just a little mistake coming in there, but 2 of these deaths going to be from essentially the same mistake. And when we were complimenting Sinking Ship on, there are kind of these mechanics from the environment, you know, whether it be a boulder rolling down and hitting you, whether it be actually jumping down on these elevators. Another one was Sinking Ship, and they executed flawlessly in the last dungeon when they actually did that skip.
And you know, the combination of Limit not hitting the good kind of, you know, the elevator was coming up at the time for Limit when they avalanche potion down. They had the extra death on the tank. Sinking Ship had a favorable elevator on the way down just by the timing. Of course, both elevators go up and down at the same rate for both teams, but they had a favorable, you know, elevator going down phase. They didn't have the death. So whatever kind of slight lead Limit had has actually really been closed up here because of that sequence. Not to mention the extra death on the board. That adds another 5 seconds and the rest time for the tank. So we're seeing both teams pretty neck and neck right now.
The trash percentage going to be essentially negligible. It's only 1% here, and we often see teams do like 104% anyway on this pool, and right now see Limit going for a really big pull here, and it's crazy how one little thing like that can really just throw the best laid plans of these guys awry. Now getting through the door after that pull, this is a very important thing. These seconds are crucial because this is going to get this long RP started as the rest of the group actually goes ahead and cleans up the rest of that trash. This could be the thing to get Limit back in it.
Yeah, no, really smart move there by Jezebel, and we're going to see it's similar from Sinking Ship. Now, the only way to open that door is actually to kill that Shade first. It opens the door, and we're seeing the exact same thing come out of Sinking Ship here, or at least we should. Yeah, we've already seen it off in the distance in that small screen. We've already seen the healer run over, start their RP, finishing up that last Brood Queen, and they will as well head over to the platform. Cordana now active for Limit. We'll have to see where they use their Bloodlust here. Some teams use it on pull, which actually we saw here as it lights up. Of course, the remaining cooldown that you see on the Bloodlust right now is due to the Mage's legendary ring, so the Mage does not have access to it just yet for preheat. But, Rich, this fight we have 3 phases. In just a moment, we'll see Cordana disappear. She will spawn a Shade or Shadow of herself, and you have to DPS that avatar down right now in order to reveal the light and get Cordana out of the shadows.
Yep, you're going to have to do that, and then the big thing that we're going to have to pay attention to is going to be that wall phase, essentially. Cordana's going to go completely immune and create shadowy images of herself. We actually going to see a death go down here. Sinking Ship, and then all just like that, we might see the third as well. The cheat death already proc. Now the rogue going to be going down, and this is just looking like the fork has been put right into the side of that ship, and they need to bail that water out or they will sink to their watery grave. I'm trying with the Sinking Ship thing here, but ultimately Limit has just managed to pull this off. They had those 2 little mistakes. I mean, 2 of these deaths come down to not getting off their avalanche. But
yeah, I mean, there's definitely a limited amount of jokes you can make with that Sinking Ship, but nonetheless, they do have the full wipe, and that's pretty much going to write it off for them. Unless Limit has a wipe as well, we are now forced into a 40-second phase where Cordana is completely immune, and we have these 4 walls spawn. Excellent view here from the observers. We can see that kind of safe gap open in the walls where the players will have to avoid, otherwise they will get punted and get dealt a substantial amount of damage from those walls. But in just a moment here, they'll be heading over to that statue that we see in the distance, pulling the boss over there and getting ready to DPS down the rest of the fight.
They got the bad lift a little bit earlier, but now they're going to get the good gap, and they get it constantly there. They're just able to pretty much stand in the same place, and now all of a sudden they're going to be able to blow those walls wide open, get right back onto Cordana, and you can see they position. They know exactly where that next Avatar of Vengeance is going to be. They get Cordana in place so they can get that cleave going. Now they just pop everything from Karma. Every single cooldown that they have just going to be popped here. Finish that last 14%, 12%, and Limit on their map pick going to be able to take this one in map number 3.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it was pretty close, though, up until that kind of, well, substantial hiccup from Sinking Ship. But, you know, Limit does take it 2-1 in the end, as they should, you know, as they should on their map pick. We see the disappointments, but, Rob?
Everything looking great for Sinking Ship until everyone died.